I stared at the email on Greg's computer, my heart pounding in my chest. The words on the screen seemed to blur together, but one phrase stood out like a neon sign: financial deceit. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the exchange between Greg and his sister, Lydia. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. "Greg," I called out, my voice wavering. "Can you come here for a minute?" He appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "What's wrong, Char?" I swiveled the laptop towards him, the incriminating email displayed prominently. "Care to explain this?" Greg's face paled as he scanned the contents. "It's not what you think," he stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "This is for the family." I let out a bitter laugh. "For the family? Or for Lydia's latest scheme?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "How could you do this behind my back, Greg? After everything we've built together?" He held up his hands defensively. "Char, you know how Lydia gets. She was in a tight spot, and I couldn't just turn my back on her." "So you decided to betray my trust instead?" I shook my head, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "How much did you give her this time?" Greg averted his gaze, his jaw clenched. 70,000. The air seemed to leave my lungs. $70,000, our hard-earned savings, meant for our future and our daughter Ellie's education. All funneled into Lydia's bottomless pit of financial irresponsibility. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Ellie's voice startled me, and I turned to see her standing in the hallway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. At 20 years old, she was wise beyond her years, and I could see the concern etched on her face. "It's nothing, honey," Greg said, forcing a smile. "Just a little family misunderstanding." I opened my mouth to protest, but the doorbell rang, cutting me off. Greg shot me a warning look before heading to answer it. Moments later, Lydia breezed into the room, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer clothes a stark contrast to the turmoil she was causing. "Charlotte, darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing my cheek. "I'm so glad you're both here. We have a bit of a situation." I tensed, my hands balling into fists at my sides. "You don't say." Lydia's gaze flickered between Greg and me, her perfectly painted lips curling into a smirk. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is a family matter, after all." As she launched into her latest sob story, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. I had been complacent for too long, allowing Greg and Lydia's manipulations to dictate the course of our lives. But not anymore. This time, I would stand my ground and protect what mattered most, my family's future and my own sense of self-worth. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. Lydia's words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, seeping into every corner of the room. "This is for Greg's future, too," she insisted, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the arm of the sofa. I fought the urge to roll my eyes. Of course, she would try to spin this as some noble act, a sacrifice for the greater good of the family. But I knew better. This was just another one of her schemes, and Greg had fallen for it hook, line, and sinker. "Stop with the lies, Lydia," I said, my voice low and steady. "I know about the emails, the money." Ellie shifted uncomfortably beside me, her gaze darting between Greg and me. I could see the confusion and hurt etched on her face, and my heart ached for her. She didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of this mess. Greg cleared his throat, his eyes pleading with me to let it go. "Char, let's not do this in front of Ellie." "No," I said firmly. "She deserves to know the truth." I turned to my daughter, taking her hand in mine. "Your father has been funneling money from our joint savings account to cover Lydia's gambling debts." Ellie's eyes widened, and she looked at Greg in disbelief. "Is this true?" Greg opened his mouth, but Lydia cut him off. "It's not as simple as that, Ellie," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I made some poor choices, yes, but your father was only trying to help me get back on my feet." I scoffed. "By taking $70,000 from our family's future? Without even consulting me?" Lydia waved a dismissive hand. Details. The important thing is that we're family, and family looks out for each other." I could feel my blood boiling, my carefully cultivated composure cracking. "Family doesn't manipulate and lie to each other," I spat. "Family doesn't betray each other's trust for their own selfish gain." Greg flinched at my words, but Lydia remained unfazed. "You're being dramatic, Charlotte," she said, her lips curling into a condescending smile. Greg was just trying to do the right thing. The right thing, I echoed, my voice rising. The right thing would have been to come clean with me from the start. The right thing would have been to let you face the consequences of your actions instead of enabling you. Lydia's eyes narrowed, and for a moment her mask of false concern slipped, revealing the entitled, manipulative woman beneath. "You're one to talk about consequences," she hissed. "You've been living a life of luxury off Greg's hard work for years." I recoiled as if she had slapped me. "How dare you?" I sputtered. "I've been the one holding this family together, working my ass off to provide for us, while Greg was off chasing get-rich-quick schemes with you." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Greg looked stricken, his face ashen, while Ellie stared at her father with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Lydia, however, simply shrugged. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, dear sister-in-law," she said, rising to her feet. "Just remember, blood is thicker than water, and you'll need us more than you think." With that parting shot, she sauntered out of the room, leaving a trail of tension and betrayal in her wake. I sank back onto the couch, suddenly drained. Greg reached out to me, but I flinched away from his touch. "Char, please," he pleaded. "Let me explain." But I had heard enough explanations, enough excuses. The truth was laid bare before me, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. My husband, the man I had trusted with my heart and my future, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And as I looked into Ellie's eyes, brimming with unshed tears, I knew that I couldn't let this stand. It was time to take control of my life, to protect what mattered most. The gloves were off, and I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine, with or without Greg by my side. The silence that followed Lydia's departure was deafening, the weight of her parting words hanging heavy in the air. I could feel the anger and hurt swirling within me, threatening to boil over. "How could you betray our trust like this, Greg?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Our future? Ellie's future?" Greg ran a hand over his face, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's complicated, Char," he said, his tone pleading. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." I let out a bitter laugh. "The pressure? From your manipulative sister, you mean?" I shook my head in disbelief. "That's no excuse, Greg. We're supposed to be partners, a team. But instead, you've been lying to me, stealing from our family's future to enable Lydia's reckless behavior." Ellie shifted uncomfortably beside me, her eyes downcast. I could only imagine the turmoil she must be feeling, caught in the crossfire of her parents' crumbling marriage. Greg's gaze flickered to our daughter, and I could see the guilt etched on his face. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said, his voice strained. "Lydia just kept needing more and more, and I couldn't turn my back on her. She's family." "And what am I, Greg?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Just some inconvenient obstacle in your twisted idea of family loyalty?" He flinched at my words, but I pressed on, the dam of emotions finally bursting forth. "I've been the one holding this family together, working my ass off to provide for us while you were off chasing get-rich-quick schemes with Lydia. And this is how you repay me? By betraying my trust, jeopardizing our daughter's future?" Greg opened his mouth to respond, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save it," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'm done with the excuses, the lies. You've made your choice, Greg, and it's clear where your loyalties lie." I turned to Ellie, my heart aching at the sight of her distress. "Honey, I'm so sorry you've been caught up in this mess," I said, taking her hand in mine. "But I promise you, I'm going to make things right, no matter what it takes." Ellie nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I trust you." Those simple words were like a balm to my wounded soul, reminding me of what truly mattered, the love and trust of my daughter, the one person who had stood by me through it all. I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her unwavering support. Then I turned back to Greg, my resolve hardening like steel. "You have one chance to come clean, Greg," I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Tell me everything, every scheme, every lie, every penny you've funneled to Lydia, and maybe, just maybe, we can start to rebuild some semblance of trust." Greg's eyes widened, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of hope in his gaze. But then his expression hardened, and he shook his head. "I can't," he said, his voice barely audible. "Lydia, she needs me." In that moment, I knew our marriage was well and truly over. The man I had loved, the partner I had trusted, was gone, replaced by a shell of a person, trapped in Lydia's web of manipulation and deceit. But as I looked at Ellie, her hands still clasped in mine, I knew that I had to be strong, for her sake and for my own. The storm was brewing, and I was ready to weather it, no matter the cost. I stared at the computer screen, my eyes burning from the countless hours spent poring over financial records and email trails. The evidence was damning, a twisted web of deceit spun by Greg and Lydia that threatened to unravel everything I had worked so hard to build. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called out, quickly minimizing the windows on my screen. Mariana, my trusted colleague and mentor, stepped into the office, her warm smile a welcome respite from the storm raging within me. "Charlotte, you look like you could use a break," she said, her voice laced with concern. I let out a weary sigh, running a hand through my disheveled hair. "I'm fine, Mariana, just trying to make sense of this mess." Her brow furrowed as she took in my haggard appearance. "This is about more than work, isn't it?" she asked gently. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how much to reveal. But Mariana had been a constant source of wisdom and support throughout my career, and I knew I could trust her. "It's Greg," I confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. "He's been funneling money to his sister, Lydia, behind my back. Thousands of dollars, gone, just to enable her reckless behavior." Mariana's eyes widened, and she sank into the chair across from me. "Oh, Charlotte," she murmured, her voice heavy with sympathy. "I'm so sorry." I shook my head, blinking back tears of frustration. "I've just been so blind, Mariana. How could I not see what was happening right under my nose?" She reached across the desk, her warm hand covering mine in a comforting gesture. "You're not to blame, dear," she said firmly. "The fault lies with those who betrayed your trust." Her words struck a chord within me, and I felt a flicker of resolve ignite in my chest. She was right. I was the victim here, not the perpetrator. Greg and Lydia had made their choices, and it was time for me to make mine. "What if I can't piece it all back together, Mariana?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. "What if the damage is too deep, too irreparable?" Mariana's gaze was steady, her eyes shining with a wisdom born of experience. "Charlotte, you are stronger than you think," she said, her voice gentle but unwavering. "Don't let them drag you down. You have the power to rise above this, to forge your own path." Her words resonated within me, igniting a flame of determination that burned away the doubt and fear that had been weighing me down. I was Charlotte Emerson, a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had built a successful career and a loving family through sheer grit and resilience, and I would not let Greg and Lydia's betrayal define me. As if sensing my newfound resolve, Mariana gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Whatever you decide, know that you have my support," she said, a warm smile spreading across her face. "You are not alone in this." I returned her smile, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Thank you, Mariana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." She waved a dismissive hand, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Nonsense, my dear. You'd find a way to conquer the world, with or without me." Her words ignited a spark of laughter within me, and for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but with allies like Mariana by my side, I knew I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As Mariana rose to leave, I felt a newfound sense of clarity wash over me. Greg had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. No more excuses, no more lies. I would uncover the truth, no matter how painful, and chart my own course forward. The facade had crumbled, and I was ready to embrace the reality that lay beneath. A reality where I, Charlotte Emerson, was the master of my own destiny. The weight of the evidence in my hands felt like a lead anchor, dragging me deeper into the murky depths of betrayal. But I knew I couldn't turn back now, not when the truth was finally within my grasp. "Charlotte, what's going on?" Margaret's voice cut through the tension, her brow furrowed with concern. "This infighting is tearing us apart." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. "Ron, Margaret, you need to know what Greg and Lydia have done." Greg's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand, silencing him. This was my moment, my chance to lay bare the tangled web of lies that had ensnared our family. For years, Greg has been funneling money from our joint savings to cover Lydia's debts, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor of anger coursing through me. Thousands upon thousands of dollars siphoned away without my knowledge or consent. Margaret gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Ron's expression hardened into a mask of stoic disapproval. "Is this true?" he demanded, his gaze boring into Greg and Lydia. Lydia, ever the master manipulator, was the first to respond. "Daddy, you know how these things can spiral out of control," she simpered, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "I made some poor choices, but Greg was only trying to help me get back on my feet." I scoffed, shaking my head in disbelief. "Don't buy into her lies, Ron," I said, my voice laced with contempt. "She's been playing you both for fools, using Greg's misguided sense of loyalty to bleed us dry." From the corner of my eye, I saw Greg flinch, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He knew the jig was up, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of the truth. "Charlotte's right," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "I should have been honest from the start, but Lydia, she just kept needing more and more." Lydia's mask of innocence slipped, her eyes narrowing into slits of fury. "You spineless worm," she hissed, rounding on Greg. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" The room descended into chaos, with Margaret sobbing and Ron bellowing for order. In the midst of the pandemonium, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The storm had finally broken, and the truth lay bare before us all. "Enough!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the din like a knife. "This ends now, Lydia." All eyes turned to me, and I could feel the weight of their collective gaze pressing down upon me. But I refused to falter, drawing strength from the knowledge that I held the power in my hands. "You have one chance to take responsibility for your actions," I said, my voice low and steady. "Admit to what you've done, and we can move forward as a family." Lydia's lips curled into a sneer, her eyes glinting with defiance. "Or what, Charlotte? You'll go running to the authorities like a scared little girl?" I met her gaze unflinchingly, my resolve unwavering. "Or I expose everything to our extended family and community," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "Every lie, every scheme, every penny you've bled from us, all laid bare for the world to see." A hush fell over the room, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Greg's parents looked stunned, their faces pale with shock and dismay. Lydia, however, simply laughed, a bitter, mocking sound that sent a chill down my spine. "You'll regret this, Charlotte," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "The family will never forgive you." But as I looked around the room, taking in the faces of those I loved most, I knew that I had already won. The truth was out, and Lydia's grip on our lives was slipping. "Better to be true and alone than entangled in falsehood with company," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. In that moment, I knew that the path ahead would be arduous, fraught with pain and heartbreak. But I was ready to face the consequences of my actions, ready to forge a new path forward, free from the shackles of manipulation and deceit. The showdown had begun, and I was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Lydia's words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, her threat reverberating through the room. "You'll regret this, Charlotte. The family will never forgive you." I met her gaze unflinchingly, my resolve hardening like steel. "Better to be true and alone than entangled in falsehood with company," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. Greg's parents exchanged a troubled glance, their faces etched with conflicting emotions. I could see the struggle playing out behind their eyes, the desire to believe their children warring with the stark reality of the truth laid bare before them. Lydia, sensing their wavering loyalty, turned on the waterworks, her eyes brimming with crocodile tears. "Mommy, Daddy, please," she simpered, her voice thick with false anguish. "You know, I would never intentionally hurt this family." But her manipulations fell on deaf ears. The evidence I had presented was damning, a mountain of financial records and email trails that left no room for doubt or excuses. Ron was the first to break the tense silence, his voice gruff with barely contained anger. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled, fixing Lydia with a steely glare. "Your sister-in-law has presented irrefutable proof of your misdeeds. It's time to face the consequences." Lydia's jaw dropped, her carefully cultivated mask of innocence shattering into 1,000 pieces. But you're supposed to be on my side," she sputtered, her eyes darting between her parents in disbelief. Margaret, her face pale and drawn, reached out to grasp her husband's hand. "We're on the side of truth, Lydia," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of sadness and resolve. "And the truth is, you've betrayed this family's trust in the most egregious way." A hush fell over the room as the weight of Margaret's words sank in. Greg, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, seemed to shrink into himself, his shoulders slumped in defeat. But Lydia was not one to go down without a fight. "This is all her doing," she spat, rounding on me with a venomous glare. "She's turned you against your own flesh and blood." I opened my mouth to respond, but Mariana beat me to it, her voice ringing out like a clarion call. "That's enough, Lydia," she said, her tone brooking no argument. "The only person responsible for this mess is you." Mariana's unwavering support was like a balm to my soul, and I felt a surge of gratitude towards my mentor and friend. She had been by my side from the beginning, offering wisdom and guidance when I needed it most. As if sensing my renewed strength, Lydia's bravado faltered, her eyes darting towards the door. But before she could make a move, Ron stepped forward, his expression steely. "You're cut off, Lydia," he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "No more handouts, no more enabling. It's time you faced the consequences of your actions." Lydia's face contorted with rage, her carefully cultivated facade crumbling into a twisted mask of fury. "You'll regret this," she snarled, her eyes wild and unhinged. "All of you." But her threats rang hollow, her power over the family finally broken. As she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end the truth had prevailed. And as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by me, Mariana, Ellie, even Greg's parents, I knew that I was not alone. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Lydia's reign of terror was over, and I was ready to take control of my life once more. As the dust settled, I turned to Ellie, my heart swelling with pride at the strength and resilience she had shown throughout this ordeal. "It's going to be okay, honey," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "We're going to get through this, together." Ellie nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and admiration. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've shown me what it means to be truly strong." In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had the courage and determination to face them head-on. With the unwavering support of my daughter and my newfound allies, I was ready to forge a new path, one free from the shackles of manipulation and deceit. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of purpose and resolve that I hadn't felt in years. It was time to take control of my destiny, once and for all. The silence that followed Lydia's dramatic exit was deafening, the weight of her actions hanging heavy in the air. But as I looked around at the faces of those who had stood by me, Mariana, Ellie, even Greg's parents, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a newfound sense of peace and resolve had taken root. "Mom?" Ellie's voice broke the stillness, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and admiration. "I'm so proud of you. You've shown me what it means to be truly strong." Her words struck a chord deep within me, and I felt a surge of emotion welling up in my chest. Through all the turmoil and heartbreak, Ellie had been my constant, a beacon of love and support that had guided me through the darkest of times. "Ellie," I said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Anything I do for us. Love is our true wealth, and as long as we have that, we'll be okay." She nodded, her arms tightening around me. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, as a united front. A soft cough drew my attention back to the others in the room, and I turned to see Greg hovering uncertainly in the doorway. His eyes were downcast, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and for a fleeting moment I felt a pang of pity for the man I had once loved. "Char," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I've made mistakes, unforgivable mistakes, but please, let me try to make things right." I studied him for a long moment, weighing his words against the weight of his betrayal. Part of me yearned for the easy path, the chance to salvage what was left of our marriage and move on with our lives. But a deeper, more primal part of me knew that it was too late for reconciliation. The trust had been shattered, the foundation of our relationship irreparably damaged by his lies and deceit. "I'm sorry, Greg," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor of emotion coursing through me. "But it's too late for apologies. You made your choice when you chose to stand by Lydia, even after everything she put us through." He flinched as if I had struck him, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Please, Char," he pleaded, taking a step towards me. "I'll do anything, just give me another chance." But I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "No, Greg," I said, my voice ringing with finality. "It's over. I can't keep living in the shadow of your lies, constantly wondering when the next betrayal will come." Ellie shifted beside me, her hand finding mine and giving it a gentle squeeze. Her silent support was all the strength I needed to forge ahead, to sever the ties that had bound me to a life of manipulation and deceit. "It's time for me to take control of my life," I said, my gaze sweeping over Greg and his parents, who had remained silent witnesses to our exchange. "I'm done being a victim. It's done being taken for granted and underappreciated." Greg opened his mouth as if to protest, but I cut him off with a shake of my head. "This is my moment, Greg," I said, my voice laced with a newfound sense of determination. "My chance to forge a new path, one free from the shackles of your sister's toxic influence." A flicker of resignation passed over his features, and he nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I just hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." I said nothing, my silence speaking volumes. Forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when the wounds of his betrayal were still so raw and fresh. As Greg turned and left, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the stillness, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a newfound sense of clarity had taken root. It was time to start building a new chapter, one brick at a time. With Ellie by my side and the unwavering support of my newfound allies, I knew that I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road would be long and arduous, but for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope, a beacon of light cutting through the darkness that had threatened to consume me. As I looked around at the familiar surroundings of my home, I felt a sense of purpose and determination wash over me. This was my sanctuary, my safe haven, and I was ready to reclaim it as my own. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. And as I turned to face the future, I knew that I would emerge stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. It was time to take control of my destiny, once and for all. The gentle hum of conversation and laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tumultuous events that had preceded this moment. As I surveyed the crowd gathered for the community celebration, I couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that had taken place, not just in my own life, but in the lives of those around me. "Look at you now, Charlotte." Mariana's voice broke through my reverie, her warm smile a familiar comfort. "You've come such a long way." I returned her smile, feeling a swell of gratitude for the unwavering support she had shown me throughout this journey. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mariana," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You were there for me when I needed it most." She waved a dismissive hand, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "Nonsense, my dear. You had the strength within you all along. I merely helped you see it." As I looked around at the familiar faces mingling and chatting, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. These were the people who had stood by me, offering their support and encouragement when the world seemed to be crumbling around me. "Mom?" Ellie's voice drew my attention, and I turned to see her beaming at me, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and affection. "We're going to be just fine, aren't we?" I pulled her into a tight embrace, savoring the moment of connection with my daughter, the one constant in a world that had been turned upside down. "Yes, honey," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be more than fine." As I held her close, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought us to this point. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the struggle to reclaim control of my life. It had all been worth it, if only to reach this moment of clarity and peace. "Charlotte!" a voice called out, and I turned to see Margaret and Ron making their way towards us, their faces etched with genuine warmth and affection. "We're so proud of you, dear," Margaret said, pulling me into a gentle embrace. "You've shown such strength and resilience through all of this." Ron nodded in agreement, his eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and regret. "We should have seen the truth sooner," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "But you never gave up, and for that, you have our eternal gratitude." I felt a lump form in my throat, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from these two people who had once been so deeply entangled in Lydia's web of deceit. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "It means more than you know." As the evening wore on, I found myself surrounded by a network of allies and supporters, colleagues, friends, and even members of the community who had rallied behind me in my darkest hour. Their words of encouragement and admiration buoyed my spirits, reminding me of the incredible journey I had undertaken and the obstacles I had overcome. And through it all, Ellie remained by my side, a constant source of strength and inspiration. Her unwavering belief in me had been the fuel that kept me going, even when the path ahead seemed shrouded in darkness. As the celebration drew to a close, I found myself standing on the periphery, watching as the crowd dispersed and the lights dimmed. A sense of peace washed over me, a feeling of contentment and closure that I hadn't experienced in years. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt truly ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. With the support of my newfound allies and the love of my daughter, I knew that I had the strength and resilience to forge a new path, one built on the foundations of truth, integrity, and self-worth. As I turned to leave, Mariana's words echoed in my mind. "Look at you now, Charlotte. You've come such a long way." And in that moment, I knew that she was right. I had come a long way, further than I could have ever imagined. But the journey was far from over, and with each step forward, I felt a newfound sense of purpose and determination. The echoes of betrayal had faded, replaced by the resounding chorus of hope and possibility. And as I looked towards the horizon, I knew that the best was yet to come.